Hi everyone, I'm Sharon, and I'm back with Chapter 2 of The Woman Warrior by Maxine Hong Kingston. When we Chinese girls listen to the adults talking story, we learn that we failed if we grew up to be but wives or slaves. We could be heroines, swordswomen. Even if she had to rage across all China, a swordswoman got even with anybody to hurt her family. Perhaps women were once so dangerous that they had to have their feet bound. It was a woman who invented white crane boxing only 200 years ago. She was already an expert pole fighter, daughter of a teacher trained at the Shaolin Temple, where there lived an order of fighting monks. She was combing her hair one morning when a white crane alighted outside her window. She teased it with a pole, which it pushed aside with a soft brush of its wing. Amazed, she dashed outside and tried to knock the crane off its perch. It snapped her pole in two. Recognizing the presence of great power, she asked the spirit of the white crane if it would teach her to fight. It answered with a cry that white crane boxers imitate today. Later, the bird returned as an old man, and he guided her boxing for many years. Thus, she gave the world a new martial art. This was one of the tamer, more modern stories, mere introduction. My mother told others that followed swordswomen through woods and palaces for years. Night after night, my mother would talk story until we fell asleep. I couldn't tell where the stories left off and the dreams began. Her voice the voice of heroines in my sleep. And on Sundays, from noon to midnight, we went to the movies at the Confucius Church. We saw swordswomen jump over houses from a standstill. They didn't even need a running start. At last I saw that I too had been in the presence of great power, my mother talking story. After I grew up, I heard the chant of Mulan, the girl who took her father's place in battle. Instantly I remembered that as a child I had followed my mother about the house, the two of us singing about how Mulan fought gloriously and returned alive from war to settle in the village. I had forgotten this chant that was once mine, given me by my mother, who may or may not have known its power to remind. She said I would grow up a wife and a slave, but she taught me the song of a warrior woman, Famine. I would have to grow up a warrior woman. The call would come from a bird that flew over our roof. In the brush drawings, it looks like the ideograph for human, two black wings. The bird would cross the sun and lift into the mountains, which looked like the ideograph mountain. There parting the mist briefly that swirled opaque again. I would be a little girl of 7 the day I followed the bird away into the mountains. The brambles would tear off my shoes and the rocks cut my feet and fingers, but I would keep climbing, eyes upward, to follow the bird. We would go around and around the tallest mountain, climbing ever upward. I would drink from the river, which I would meet again and again. We would go so high the plants would change, the river that flows past the village would become a waterfall. At the height where the bird used to disappear, the clouds would gray the world like an ink wash. Even when I got used to that gray, I would only see peaks of this as if shaded in pencil, rocks like charcoal rubbings, everything so murky. There would be just two black strokes, the bird, inside the clouds, inside a dragon's breath. I would not know how many hours or days passed. Suddenly, without noise, I would break clear into the yellow, warm world. New trees would lean towards me at a mountain angle, and when I looked for the village, it would have vanished under the clouds. The bird, now gold, so close to the sun, would come to rest on the thatch of a hut, which, until the bird's 2 feet touched it, was camouflaged as part of the mountainside. The door opened, and an old man and an old woman came out carrying bowls of rice and soup and a leafy branch of peaches. "Have you eaten rice today, little girl?" they greeted me. "Yes, I have," I said out of politeness. "Thank you." "No, I haven't," I would have said in real life, mad at the Chinese for lying so much. "I'm starved. Do you have cookies? I like chocolate chip cookies." "We were about to sit down to another meal," the old woman said. "Why don't you eat with us?" They just happened to be bringing 3 rice bowls and 3 pairs of silver chopsticks out to the plant table under the pines. They gave me an egg, as if it were my birthday, and tea, though they were older than I, but I poured for them. The teapot and the rice pot seemed bottomless, but perhaps not. The old couple ate very little except for peaches. When the mountains and the pines turned into blue oxen, blue dogs, and blue people standing, the old couple asked me to spend the night in the hut. I thought about the long way down in the ghostly dark and decided yes. The inside of the hut seemed as large as the outdoors. Pine needles covered the floor in thick patterns. Someone had carefully arranged the yellow, green, and brown pine needles according to age. When I stepped carelessly and mussed a line, my feet kicked up new blends of earth colors. But the old man and the old woman walked so lightly that their feet never stirred the designs by a needle. A rock grew in the middle of the house, and that was their table. The benches were fallen trees, ferns and shade flowers grew out of one wall, the mountainside itself. The old couple tucked me into bed just my width. Breathe evenly, or you'll lose your balance and fall out, said the woman, covering me with a silk bag stuffed with feathers and herbs. Opera singers, who begin their training at age 5, sleep in beds like this. Then the two of them went outside, and through the window I could see them pull on a rope looped over a branch. The rope was tied to the roof, and the roof opened up like a basket lid. I would sleep with the moon and the stars. I did not see whether the old people slept, so quickly I did drop off, but they would be there waking me with food in the morning. Little girl, you have spent almost a day and a night with us, the old woman said. In the morning light I could see her earlobes pierced with gold. Do you think you can bear to stay with us for 15 years? We can train you to become a warrior. What about my mother and father? I asked. The old man untied a drinking gourd slung across his back. He lifted the lid by its stem and looked for something in the water. Ah, there, he said. At first I saw only water so clear it magnified the fibers in the walls of the gourd. On the surface I saw only my own round reflection. The old man encircled the neck of the gourd with his thumb and index finger and gave it a shake. As the water shook, then settled, the colors and the lights shimmered into a picture, not reflecting anything I could see around me. There at the bottom of the gourd were my mother and father scanning the sky, which was where I was. It has happened already, then, I could hear my mother say. I didn't expect it so soon. You knew from her birth that she would be taken, my father said. We'll have to harvest potatoes without her help this year, my mother said, and then they turned away towards the fields, straw baskets in their arms. The water shook and just became water again. Mama, Papa, I called, but they were in the valley and could not hear me. What do you want to do? The old man asked. You can go back right now if you like. You can go pull sweet potatoes, or you can stay with us and learn how to fight barbarians and bandits. You can avenge your village, said the old woman. You can recapture the harvests that the thieves have taken. You can be remembered by the Han people for your dutifulness. I'll stay with you, I said. So the hut became my home, and I found that the old woman did not arrange the pine needles by hand. She opened the roof, an autumn wind would come up, and the needles fell in braids, brown strands, green strands, yellow strands. The old woman waved her arms in conducting motions. She blew softly with her mouth. I thought, nature certainly works differently on mountains than in valleys. The first thing you will learn, the old woman told me, is how to be quiet. They left me by streams to watch for animals. If you're noisy, you'll make the deer go out without the water. When I could kneel all day without my legs cramping and my breathing became even, the squirrels could bury their hoardings at the hem of my shirt and then bend their tails in a celebration dance. At night, the mice and toads looked at me, their eyes quick stars and slow stars. Not once would I see a 3-legged toad, though you needed strings of cash to bait them. The two old people led me in exercises that began at dawn and ended at sunset, so that I could watch their shadows grow and shrink and grow again, rooted to the earth. I learned to move my fingers, hands, feet, head, and entire body in circles. I walked putting heel down first, toes pointing down 30 to 40 degrees, making the ideograph 8, making the ideograph human. Knees bent, I would swing into slow, measured square step, the powerful walk into battle. After years, my body became so strong that I could control even the dilations of the pupils inside my irises. I could copy owls and bats, the words for bat and blessing homonyms. After 6 years, a deer let me run beside them. I could jump 20 feet into the air from a standstill, leaping like a monkey over the hut. Every creature has a hiding skill and a fighting skill a warrior can use. When birds alighted on my palm, I could yield my muscles under their feet and give them no base from which to fly away. But I could not fly like the bird that led me here, except in large, free dreams. During the 7th year, I would be 14. The two old people led me blindfolded to the mountains of the white tigers. They held me by either elbow and shouted into my ears, "Run, run, run." I ran and, not stepping off a cliff at the edge of my toes and not hitting my forehead against the wall, ran faster. A wind buoyed me over the roots, the rocks, the little hills. We reached a tiger place in no time, a mountain peak 3 feet from the sky. We had to bend over. The old people waved once, slid down a mountain, and disappeared around a tree. The old woman, good with the bow and arrow, took them with her. The old man took the water gourd. I would have to survive barehanded. Snow lay on the ground, and snow fell in loose gusts, another way the dragon breathes. I walked in the direction from which we had come, and when I reached the timberline, I collected wood broken from the cherry tree, the peony, the walnut, which is the tree of life. Fire, the old people had taught me, is stored in trees that grow red flowers or red berries in the spring, whose leaves turn red in the fall. I took the wood from protected spots beneath the trees and wrapped it in my scarf to keep dry. I dug where squirrels might have come, stealing 1 or 2 nuts at each place. These I also wrapped in my scarf. It is possible, the old people said, for a human being to live for 50 days on water. I would save the roots and nuts for hard climb, the places where nothing grew. The emergency should I not find a hut. This time there would be no bird to follow. The first night I burned half of the wood and slept curled against the mountain. I heard the white tigers prowling on the other side of the fire, but I could not distinguish them from snow patches. The morning rose perfectly. I hurried along again collecting wood and edibles. I ate nothing and only drank the snow my fires made run. The first 2 days were gifts, the fasting so easy to do. I so smug in my strength that on my third day, the hardest, I caught myself sitting on the ground opening the scarf and staring at the nuts and dry roots. Instead of carrying on steadily or even eating, I faded into dreams of the meat meals my mother used to cook, my monk food forgotten. That night I burned up most of the wood I collected, unable to sleep for facing my death. If not death, then death someday. The moon animals that did not hibernate came out to hunt, but I had given up the habits of a carnivore since living with the old people. I would not trap mice that danced so close, or the owls that plunged just outside a fire. On the 4th and 5th days, my eyesight sharp with hunger, I saw deer and used their trails when our ways coincided. Where the deer nibbled, I gathered the fungus of immortality. At noon on the 10th day, I packed snow, white as rice, into the worn center of a rock pointed out to me by a finger of ice, and around the rock I built a fire. In the warming water I put in roots, nuts, and the fungus of immortality. For variety, I ate a quarter of nuts and roots raw. Oh, green joyous rush, inside my head, my mouth, my stomach, my toes, my soul, the best meal of my life. One day I found out I was striding long distances without hindrance, my bundle light. Food had become so scarce that I was no longer stopping to collect it. I walked into dead land. Here even the snow stopped. I did not go back to the richer lands, where I could not stay out anyway, but resolving so fast, until I got halfway to the next woods, I started across the dry rocks. Heavily weighed down by the wood on my back, branches poking maddeningly, I had burnt almost all the fuel not to waste strength lugging it. Somewhere in the dead land I lost count of the days. It seemed as if I had been walking forever. Life had never been different from this. An old man and an old woman were help if I only wished for. I was 14 years old and I lost for my village. I was walking in circles. Hadn't I already found by the old people, or was that yet to come? I wanted my mother and father. The old man and old woman were only a part of this lostness and this hunger. One nightfall, I ate the last of my food, but still had sticks for a good fire. I stared into the flames, which reminded me about helping my mother with cooking and made me cry. It was very strange looking through water into fire and seeing my mother again. I nodded, orange and warm. A white rabbit hopped beside me, and for a moment I thought it was a blob of snow that had fallen from the sky. The rabbit and I studied each other. Rabbits taste like chickens. My mother and father had taught me how to hit rabbits over the head with wine jugs, then skin them cleanly for fur vests. It's a cold night to be an animal, I said. So you want some fire too, do you? Let me put another branch on then. I would not hit it with a branch. I had learned from rabbits to kick backwards. Perhaps this one was so sick because normally the animals did not like fire. The rabbit seemed alert enough, however, looking at me so acutely, bounding up to the fire. But it did not stop when it got to the edge. It turned its face toward me once, then jumped into the fire. The fire went down for a moment, as if crouching in surprise, then the flames shot up taller than before. When the fire became calm again, I saw the rabbit had been turned to meat, browned just right. I ate it, knowing the rabbit had sacrificed itself for me. It had made me a gift of meat. We have been walking through trees hour after hour, until I finally reached trees after the dead land. Branches cross out everything, no relief whichever way your head turns until your eyes start to invent new sights. Hunger also changes the world. When eating can't be a habit, neither can seeing. I saw two people made of gold dancing the earth's dances. They turned so perfectly that together they were axes of earth's turning. They were light, they were molten, changing gold. Chinese lion dancers, African lion dancers in mid-step. I had heard Japanese bells deepening in mid-ring to Indian bells, Hindu Indian, American Indian. Before my eyes, gold bells shredded into gold tassels that fanned into two royal capes that softened into lion's fur. Manes grew tall into feathers that shone, became light rays. Then the dancers danced the future, a machine future, in clothes I had never seen before. I am watching the centuries pass in moments because suddenly I understand time, which is spinning and fixed like a north star. I understand how working and hoeing are dancing, how peasant clothes are golden, as king's clothes are golden, how one of the dancers is always a man and the other a woman. The man and the woman grew bigger and bigger, so bright, all light. They are tall angels in two rows. They have high white wings on their back. Perhaps they are infinite angels. Perhaps I see two angels in their consecutive moments. I cannot bear the brightness and cover my eyes, which hurt from opening so wide without a blink. When I put my hands down to look again, I recognized the old brown man and the old gray woman walking towards me out of the pine forest. It would seem that this small crack in the mystery was opened, not so much by the old man's magic as by hunger. Afterwards, whenever I did not eat for long, as during famine or battle, I could stare at ordinary people and see their light in gold. I could see their dance. When I get hungry enough, then killing and falling are dancing too. The old people fed me hot vegetable soup. Then they asked me to talk story about what happened in the mountains of the white tigers. I told them that the white tigers had stalked me through the snow, but that I had fought them off with burning branches, and my great-grandparents had come to lead me safely through the forests. I had met a rabbit who taught me about self-immolation and how to speed up